I often say that I'm having to do a very difficult video, and this is no exception. And there are two things I want to talk about today. Firstly is future progress in Morocco in relation to rabies. And secondly is the admission of animals to Georgia. We had a wonderful meeting the day before yesterday with a friend of ours who was the president of a very significant dog charity in the UK and has considerable professional expertise, both in relation to the rescue of dogs, but more importantly, the work he has done with rabies all over the world. And he came to see me because he'd been concerned, because I'd mentioned on one of my videos that we wanted to help ONSO wherever we could in the TNVR scheme, which is Trap, Neuter, Vaccination and Release. And he had been concerned about that, and rightly so, because I've also had very serious conversations with Salima Kadou, who is she established the big refuge in Tangier and also Project Hyatt in Tangier with the aim of making Tangier a rabies-free city. And she has had excellent success in many areas. And this was reinforced by my friend who came to see me, who told me of instances around the world where, for example, in Goa is now rabies-free area in India, completely rabies-free. And of course, the important thing about working with dogs to combat rabies is the effect on human health. And that's a position that Sally takes very seriously. It's working with the authorities for them to understand that if we manage the dog population properly, we can start to eliminate rabies in humans. Now, what has happened in Morocco is that the government has been very good in setting up programs where if an individual is bitten by a dog, they can have a rabies shot free of charge anywhere and immediately. But of course, those shots are free to the individual, even to tourists visiting the country, but they're very costly to the government. Of course, if the dog population could be managed better, that would relieve some of that cost as well. However, the message I'm given by the people who do know, and I mean the people who do know, is that setting up small little schemes to maybe catch and sterilise and vaccinate in an area and release them into the community without a great deal of planning will not work. And very often the reason it won't work is that if you release the dogs and they are tagged, the local population see those dogs as a threat who aren't going to be caught by the authorities, and they will poison them. And that's what happens. It's happened all over the place, and it's happened in other countries as well. And in order to combat rabies, you have to have 70% immunisation amongst the dog population to create herd immunity. Now, we are beginning to look with the authorities, hopefully, at a long-term plan, and we hope very much that Sally or Salima would lead that because she has shown the way. And this is what I'm told, and it makes sense. You have to work to begin with the schools, for example. You have to send people into the schools, with the school's consent, of course, and educate the children about rabies. Not about loving dogs, but about rabies. And then the beneficial spin-off in terms of the dogs and animals in their community and the human population. That work has to be done, and it has to be done with communities first. Now, Sally up in Tangier, what she has done is in the communities where dogs have been released, She actually pays guardians to keep an eye on the dogs and to make sure that they are not poisoned or killed by people who don't understand what's being done. And of course, food is provided. Now, unless that is done, you'll be vaccinating dogs, sterilizing them, putting them back into the community, and they will be vulnerable. If they are killed off by local people, the dogs from outside that area will come in and replace them. And this work must be done before groups start setting up TNVR schemes that have caused problems throughout Morocco. Now, I'm not saying that we have all the answers, far from it. Equines is our speciality. But of course, we are affected because we have, now I think we have 140 equines here, and they are vulnerable from dog bites, and donkeys do get rabies. And you know that we've recently, with the help of ONSA, had all our donkeys vaccinated, so they're quite safe if visitors come. So we do have an interest and an involvement, and we are very happy to be involved in the dialogue. And of course, if we go into the schools, that can't be done by people like me. It can't be done by Europeans going in and preaching to Moroccans. That's just a nonsense. You have to have young, enthusiastic people. And of course, we have been talking to some of the young men here. Who springs to mind immediately is Ayub and Simo and Abdani, and they are more than willing and more than capable to start doing the work in the schools. So that's work in progress. And I really don't invite a debate about it. I'm not interested in a debate. I'm interested in a debate with the authorities. And if we are able to make progress, we can then encompass and include other people. Secondly, is the state of the refuge itself. Now, one of the things that the gentleman said to me who came to talk to me about rabies, and he does have knowledge and experience, was that he thought a reason why we have been so successful here in terms of being able to continue is because we have not allowed our hearts to rule our heads, but our heads have ruled our hearts. Which doesn't mean we don't care about animals, but it means if we do care about them, we have to approach the situation like a business, but obviously not to make profit. And we only just manage to keep going, so please don't misunderstand me there. But we know from our own experience that in terms of investment, before we could even start taking donkeys, and a lot of it happened by accident because we lived here first, but the investment, buying our land, investing the infrastructure, the electricity, the adequate water, and the build of the stables, we were really looking at a couple of £1 million. I don't exaggerate, but that's what it was like. And that was our gift to Morocco. Georgia will continue when we're dead and gone. No one is allowed to sell it. I promise you it will continue. But then, of course, you have to think of the running costs. I have 15 staff and it's not enough, but they're very committed and we manage and we cope for the moment. But of course, we're going to have to grow. That's inevitable. And we've got to find a way of growing without damaging the reputation we have or the spirit of Georgia, which is very important to us. Something that is happening in Morocco at the moment, and it's worrying, is that because of the pandemic, there are so many animals in distress, and people do care, and they are upset. And lots of little charities are setting up all over the place. Now, some will be very genuine, and they find in a short space of time they can't raise the funds and can't continue. Others maybe see it as a mechanism for making money. Neither works. In order to run a charity in Morocco, I'm honestly trying not to preach or saying I agree with everything, but it's the reality. You really have to be registered, and to some extent that's fairly straightforward in Morocco. But being registered doesn't necessarily bring the money in. That's a reality. And our experience has been that because we were British and because we did a lot of work in the UK establishing a charity there, we were able to raise donations worldwide because the UK is seen as a very safe financial sector, and it is governed by the Charity Commission when it comes to charities. Without that, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And sadly, there are some really good charities here who really can't get the financial assistance because they don't have the base in America or the UK. In parts of Europe, it doesn't work quite the same, and it's much more difficult to get funds in. I say that from experience, not to disappoint or undermine other people. We are going out this evening, which is wonderful, to a birthday dinner with someone who works in the charitable sector and is very closely linked with a well-known charitable organisation in Casablanca, and they are all visiting us tomorrow. And that's a good opportunity to make those links between people that are proven and able to do good and substantial work. But back to our position here, you will know by following me how full we are. And we're always having to build new stables. Now, we've had a request from local town if we would take 2 elderly female donkeys. One is 22, and they're in good health. How could we say no? But what people don't always realise is bringing them here, every donkey means another £800 a year. You can't work with economies of scale. That doesn't work, because they all have to be fed. And the more donkeys you have, the more staff you have, because if they're not kept clean in hygienic conditions, you will breed disease. Of course, you know we never intended to have horses, and now we do. We have stallions in the top field, and we have a mare. And I've had a request from a self-funding organisation close to Agadir, who has been trying to set up a refuge but hasn't been able to get sufficient funds, who's found another mare seriously requires help, but they can't afford to offer the care. So I'm going to speak to the boys afterwards and see if it could be accommodated here. But you get my point, don't you? We have the facilities, we have the infrastructure. We somehow have to keep going. But before other people set up like-minded organisations, they must think through the long game. We are here for the long game, and don't think otherwise. Charles and I are in our 70s, and probably within the next 10 years, we will cross the Rainbow Bridge, and arrangements have been made for Georgia to continue. And it is forbidden that Georgia will ever be sold. I'm not going to go into the details. That's pretty morbid and pretty, boring. We're also making provision that we are so committed to Georgia and this land that already our men are preparing a plot up behind the horses that will become our own burial plot. So we are here for the long term, and I intend to stay here after I've died, and I shall be watching them. They've been told to bury me facing the refuge, and I will be in touch with them. I joke, of course, but you see what I mean? Setting up a refuge such as this isn't just, gosh, we'll have an association, then we'll be able to get some money, and we'll do what they've done, or what Spanner have done, or what Umpa has done, or the Fonduk at Fez. and so on. It isn't that straightforward, and it needs to be thought through very carefully, and it wants commitment in the long term, forever. I'm sorry to be so gloomy and boring, but I'm very anxious that we continue to try and get it right, all of us. So bye for now.